Welcome back to the deep dive. So, we've been following this really incredible story of the DuBose family, haven't we?
We certainly have. From their arrival through the revolution, pushing west.
Establishing themselves, becoming, quite successful, part of that Southern elite.
Absolutely. Building a world that, well, must have felt permanent, solid, almost like untouchable.
And that feeling, that sense of permanence, that's really the crucial backdrop for today, isn't it?
It really is, because up to this point, their story is all about growth, expansion, more control. Becoming this planter aristocracy in South Carolina, building this whole system, wealth, influence.
A very carefully built world.
Yeah, exactly. And today, that entire world just slams right into the biggest, most tragic, most transformative moment in American history, the Civil War.
Okay, so let's really dive into this specific generation, the DuBose ancestors who lived right through the middle of it. For them, this wasn't just some distant political thing.
Oh, not at all. It was existential. Yeah. Completely.
Our goal today really is to get inside their perspective. They saw it as a war for their homes, right? For their state, their way of life.
And we have to be really clear that way of life was completely, fundamentally built on slavery, on coerced labor. There's no separating those things.
So our mission here is to zoom right in, look at the human side of this massive break.
We want to explore the stories of the men who went off to fight, the soldiers, but also the huge, often overlooked impact on the white women left behind, running these huge plantations.
And critically, the massive shift for the enslaved people, hundreds of them, whose bodies really propped up the whole DuBose system, the hope and the fear they must have felt.
It's a story with multiple, often conflicting layers.
Right. So let's set the stage. We have to go back to 1860, right on the edge of it all. The DuBose family, they weren't just doing okay, they were powerful.
Oh, definitely dominant. Politically, economically, they are dug in deep in that planter class.
And location matters here, you said? Kershaw and Sumter counties in South Carolina.
Yes, absolutely critical. Because that area, that's the absolute heartland of cotton. Short staple cotton, perfect climate, perfect soil for it. And just as important, it was the political epicenter. This is where secessionist feeling was strongest.
So their success wasn't just, good farming. It was directly tied to how big their operation was.
Which means how many enslaved people they owned. Directly proportional.
Their identity, their money, their social standing, their political clout.
All of it is completely tangled up with owning human beings. By 1860, the wealth of that class in South Carolina was just immense. And something like, 80% of their financial worth was actually the estimated value of the enslaved people themselves.
80%?
Yeah. So for the DuBose family, protecting slavery wasn't some abstract idea. It was literally defending their bank balance, their social position, their entire inheritance. It was everything, the bedrock.
And South Carolina, well, it goes first, leads the charge out of the Union.
The absolute vanguard, yeah. December 1860.
So given how deeply invested the DuBoses were, financially, socially, was there any hesitation, any divided loyalty?
Doesn't look like it, not from the records we have. Their loyalty was completely with their state. That, plus the huge financial stake. It meant immediate, total allegiance to the Confederacy.
Secession just seemed like the only option.
The only practical, moral, and economic choice from their point of view. Being a South Carolinian, being a major slaveholder, those identities just fused together. They genuinely saw themselves as defending civilization, their civilization.
Okay, that moves us into our first section then, the Confederate call. How they responded, why they enlisted.
Because the moment the Confederacy forms, the call for volunteers goes out.
And the DuBose men, our sources showed, they jumped right in. Fast, enthusiastic.
Extremely enthusiastic. You see this all across the South, really. Young men, patriotic fervor, sometimes in homemade uniforms, rushing to sign up.
There was this sort of romantic idea about it all in 61, wasn't there?
Oh, definitely. The war would be quick, glorious, a chance to prove Southern manhood, honor. That was the feeling.
But let's unpack the reasons they gave. The rhetoric. They talked about defending homes, defending the Confederacy, this new nation, states' rights.
And this is where we, as historians, have to kind of probe a bit deeper, right? States' rights was the sort of polished legal argument.
The political argument.
Exactly. But the specific right they were most fiercely defending was the right to manage their own economy. And their economy was slavery. Full stop. In their world, you just couldn't separate those ideas. Their whole social structure rested on controlling human property.
So looking at their motivation, it's this mix. Genuine loyalty to the region, maybe. That cultural pressure of honor.
Sure, those things were real. But underneath it, absolutely driving it, was the very real, very immediate fear of losing that colossal investment, their wealth, their power.
The cause at its heart was keeping that slaveholding society intact.
It was absolutely an existential fight for them. For a DuBose man to even think about giving up slavery, that meant losing everything.
Yeah.
His fortune, his political standing, his place in the world. So that rush to enlist, it wasn't just parades and excitement. It was like a preemptive move against what they saw as total destruction of their way of life.
Okay, that sets up the transition perfectly. From these grand ideas about why they're fighting
To the reality.
to the mud, the blood, the grim reality of actually being a soldier.
Yeah.
Let's get into section 2, where that initial excitement fades really, really fast.
Right. And here we're lucky because we have these amazing firsthand documents tied specifically to the DuBose family project. We can move beyond the general story.
Get specific, see the day-to-day struggle, the human cost.
Exactly.
Let's start with Henry James DuBose. What do we know about his service?
Okay, Henry James. He served in the 4th South Carolina Cavalry. Cavalry was vital scouting, screening the army, mobile defense, especially later in the war.
In his early letters, they show that excitement.
They do, yeah. That 1861 feeling, high adventure, leaving home. But it doesn't last long. His records pretty quickly turn into descriptions of just relentless hardship, suffering.
Because the reality of war back then, it wasn't always big battles, was it? It was often just trying to survive day-to-day logistics.
Far less about glory, much more about basic survival, and often failing at it. Henry's letters, they're full of details about the awful conditions. Not just long marches, but long marches with no food.
Right.
He writes again and again about being hungry, constantly hungry. Rations might be just some cornmeal, if they were lucky. Troops often had to forage, basically becoming armed groups just looking for anything to eat.
And the enemy wasn't just the Union Army. There was this other invisible threat.
Huge. We really have to stress this. Disease killed way more soldiers than bullets ever did. Typhoid, dysentery, measles, just chronic diarrhea. These things swept through the camps.
And Henry writes about this.
His accounts show that constant exposure. You could get through a fight without a scratch, then die from bad water the next day. Medical care was, well, incredibly basic. Camp life itself was practically a death sentence for thousands before they even saw a major battle.
But Henry did see combat. He wasn't spared that. There's a record of a specific fight in 1864.
Yes. By 1864, things are getting desperate for the Confederacy. The Union pressure is immense. Henry was wounded at the Battle of Old Church. It's in Virginia.
What kind of fight was that?
A really brutal cavalry clash. Fast, chaotic, close-up fighting. Typical of the kind of scouting and raiding actions happening late in the war. The fact he was wounded there tells you something.
By that point, soldiers must have been worn down.
Totally exhausted. Morale was low because of the constant lack of supplies. They were fighting on pure grit, really, long after any real strategic hope was gone.
So Henry James DuBose's story, it kind of captures that whole arc, doesn't it? From the young, eager volunteer
Yeah.
to the exhausted, hungry, sick, wounded soldier just trying to endure, facing constant danger, losing friends.
He's a perfect example, a microcosm. By the time he got wounded, the war was just this meat grinder. Constant attrition. They were in an army that was outgunned, outnumbered, outsupplied. Their whole support system was collapsing.
And yet he survived being wounded, kept fighting.
Which shows incredible personal courage, but also that powerful belief in their cause that kept them going, even then.
Okay, there's another DuBose we know about from the sources, Julius Edward DuBose. His story comes to us differently, though, through an obituary written much later, in 1896.
That's right. And the obituary is interesting not just for what it says about his service, but how it says it. It gives us a glimpse into that post-war lost cause narrative we need to talk about later.
What does it actually say about his service?
It praises his gallantry, specifically. And it makes a point of saying he served through the entire war, start to finish.
4 years. Surviving 4 years of that kind of fighting is incredible in itself.
It really is. A feat.
If he served the whole time, what kind of campaigns would he have seen? Where would he likely have fought?
Oh, he would have been through the absolute thick of it. We're talking the major battles in the East, probably the 7 Days battles near Richmond early on, maybe Gettysburg, the brutal trench warfare defending Petersburg later, and then right at the end, that desperate, hopeless fighting in the Carolinas campaign, defending his own home state.
So we have these two figures. Henry, the cavalryman facing hardship and injury. Julius, the veteran who somehow made it through years of intense battles. Putting their stories together, it's clear the DuBose men weren't somehow insulated from the worst of it. They were right in it, defining it almost.
Absolutely. Their endurance, their persistence. It shows this almost like religious devotion to the cause. They truly believed they were defending something sacred, and they paid an incredibly high price for that belief in blood, sickness, years of physical hardship.
But we need to pivot now, right? Because while the men were off fighting to preserve their way of life.
That way of life was actually crumbling behind them back home.
Exactly. Let's move to section 3, the home front. What happened on those plantations, places like St. John's, Berkeley, when the men left? The burden that fell suddenly on the DuBose women.
It's a story of just complete upheaval. These women were left managing everything. And we get this incredible intimate view from the 2 diaries from Middle St. John.
Those diaries are key sources here.
Absolutely essential.
Yeah.
Because they capture the daily grind, trying to keep a huge plantation running when all the normal supports, markets, money, mail authority just evaporated.
Right. The men held all the official power, legal, financial. The women were mostly raised for domestic roles, social management.
And suddenly, boom, they're thrown into jobs they had zero training for.
Yeah.
The survival of the whole economic unit is on their shoulders.
What did that involve? What were their biggest challenges?
Well, first, just overseeing the farming, making sure fields got planted, not just cotton, which was hard to sell anyway because of the blockade, but food. They desperately needed food crops to feed everyone on the plantation, hundreds of people, white and black.
A logistical nightmare, probably. With tools breaking down, supplies short.
Total nightmare. And then the second huge challenge, maybe even more difficult, labor management.
Managing the enslaved workforce.
Yes. With the masters gone, the overseers often gone too, the DuBose women were suddenly the ones directly in charge. And this wasn't just telling people what to do, it was trying to maintain control, maintain productivity over people who were hearing whispers, more than whispers, that the whole system of slavery was collapsing.
You can imagine the tension. The diaries must show that instability, trying to keep order in those circumstances.
You definitely see the strain in the documents. The women are trying to assert authority, maybe enforce discipline, but the enslaved community knows the master's power is fading. The women are trying to wield power that's based on a system that's dissolving right under their feet.
And on top of that psychological stress, they're facing physical hardship themselves, right? Shortages.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That federal blockade, the Anaconda Plan, it was designed to strangle the Confederacy economically, and the diaries show the effects vividly.
Not just general lack of things, but specific needs.
Exactly. Things like medicine. Imagine needing quinine for malaria, or morphine for pain, or even clean bandages for wounds. And there's just none to be had. But maybe the most telling detail, the one that really hits home the level of desperation, is about salt.
Salt. Such a basic thing.
Basic, but essential. For preserving meat, for health. One diary entry describes how Mrs. DuBose, it's just incredible, she had to order enslaved workers to literally scrape the dirt floor of the smokehouse.
Scrape the dirt.
Yeah, where meat had been cured for years and years. Scrape up that dirt, boil it down, just to try and get back tiny little traces of salt, saline residue.
Wow. Boiling dirt from the floor. That paints a picture of utter collapse, doesn't it?
It really does. A wealthy family reduced to that. It shows how completely the supply chains broke down.
So you have that physical hardship, the lack of basic necessities, and then layer on top the constant fear. The men were facing bullets, but the women were living with the dread of invasion.
That anxiety was always there. Always. Especially later in the war, after 1864, it became very real. Every rumor of Union troops nearby, every distant cannon sound, it meant maybe losing everything. Their home, their belongings, their personal safety.
They knew what happened when Union armies arrived, right?
They knew the game was up, property would be destroyed or confiscated,
Mm-hmm.
and crucially, the enslaved people would leave. They would seize their freedom.
So the white DuBose family is fighting on two fronts, really. The men facing the enemy army, the women facing economic ruin and sheer terror at home. Now we need to shift focus again to that third group on the plantation, the ones who saw the war not as disaster, but as potential liberation.
Exactly. Section 4, the hope of Jubilee, the perspective of the enslaved people. And for this, we really have to rely on those WPA slave narratives. Oral histories collected decades later.
These are incredibly important sources, aren't they?
Absolutely crucial. They're not perfect. Obviously, memory is filtered. People are speaking to white interviewers in the 1930s. But they give us a direct line, or as direct as we can get, into how the war was experienced and remembered by formerly enslaved people.
And for the people enslaved on DuBose lands, this war wasn't about states' rights or economics in the same way. It was about freedom.
It was about deliverance.
Yeah.
The narratives talk about whispered news, this growing, tangible hope.
How did they get news? How did information travel?
Through amazing informal networks, what they call the grapevine telegraph. Enslaved people who worked in the main house or as drivers, they'd overhear conversations, maybe see discarded newspapers, talk to travelers. They pieced together what was happening.
And the main message was?
Lincoln's army. Lincoln's army is coming and bringing freedom, emancipation.
That knowledge, even whispered, must have changed things on the plantation immediately, making the DuBose women's job of managing labor almost impossible.
It totally undermined the foundations of control. Yes, people were still forced to work under incredibly difficult conditions, but the authority of the mistress, it was visibly weakening. You can see it in the narratives. People were calculating, why risk everything for a system they knew was dying?
How did that play out day to day, this resistance?
Yeah.
Especially with the masters away.
Often it was subtle, quiet, persistent. Work might slow down. Tools might accidentally break more often. Orders might be misunderstood, deliberately perhaps. The narratives talk about people watching, waiting, preparing.
Not necessarily open revolt, but
More like conserving energy, assessing the situation, waiting for the right moment to actually claim their freedom, and waiting for that Jubilee.
Jubilee, that biblical idea of release, of restoration, it became real for them, a political possibility.
Yes, exactly. It shifted from being just a spiritual hope, something maybe an afterlife, to something that might actually happen now, politically on Earth. They knew freedom wouldn't just be handed over. They'd likely have to seize it, often by literally walking away when Union lines got close enough.
And when that moment finally came, emancipation in 1865, how did the narratives describe it?
Overwhelming joy. Just sheer physical, spiritual release. People crying, shouting, praying. Imagine generations of waiting, of enduring bondage, and then it's over. The weight is lifted. It was fulfillment of everything they'd hoped for.
But right alongside that joy, uncertainty.
Huge uncertainty. Instantly. Okay, you're free, but you have no land, no money, often just the clothes you're wearing, no legal standing outside the plantation system you just left.
You go from being property to being a free laborer overnight.
In a society that's incredibly hostile and wants to keep you down, it's chaotic, it's frightening. It's the start of a whole new, incredibly difficult journey. So you see, the DuBose story in 1865 is really two completely different narratives unfolding at the same time, opposite trajectories.
That stark contrast takes us right into Section 5, the aftermath, transformation, and the rise of the lost cause.
Right. When Henry James DuBose, Julius Edward DuBose, the ones who survived, when they finally got home, it wasn't the world they left. Not even close. The cause was lost.
Completely lost, their personal fortunes wiped out. This wasn't like a bad year for crops. This was total economic destruction.
Let's be specific about that economic ruin. Confederate money was worthless paper. But the big hit was losing the enslaved workforce, wasn't it?
Catastrophic. Like we said, maybe 80% of their wealth was tied up in owning people. When slavery ends, poof, that capital disappears overnight. No compensation, nothing. They might still own land, but they have no cash, no labor force as they knew it.
And they're suddenly facing a free labor market they have no idea how to navigate ideologically or practically.
Exactly. They come back, defeated, often to estates that are physically ruined from the war, stripped bare. And they're trying to rebuild, trying to reassert control over people who are now legally free and actively resisting that control. The psychological shock must have been unbelievable.
Unbelievable. How do you even process that level of defeat? 4 years of sacrifice, horror, for nothing, for total failure. Well, that's where this narrative comes in, the lost cause. It starts to take shape almost immediately after the war. We see hints of it even in that 1896 obituary for Julius Edward DuBose.
How does the obituary do that? By calling him gallant.
Yes, the language is key. It frames the whole Confederate effort as heroic, noble. It starts to scrub away the real reason for the war, slavery.
So the lost cause basically rewrites history.
That's its core function, yeah. It becomes this powerful ideology, arguing the war wasn't about slavery at all. It was about states' rights, defending Southern honor, protecting a supposedly benevolent way of life from Northern aggression. It frames defeat not as a moral failing, but as a noble tragedy against overwhelming odds.
And men like Henry and Julius get remembered through that lens.
Exactly. They become symbols, not men who fought to keep people enslaved, but brave veterans who fought for honor, for duty, against a stronger foe.
That narrative must have been psychologically crucial for the White South.
Absolutely essential. It provided a way to cope with defeat, to maintain a sense of pride, even racial superiority, while dealing with economic ruin and political upheaval. The DuBose family, by adopting and promoting this narrative, helped build the foundation for Southern identity and racial politics for decades to come.
It just really highlights this profound split, this rupture created by the war. You can't talk about the DuBose family experience without seeing these two totally different outcomes.
It's the ultimate historical divergence, isn't it? For the white DuBoses, the war means the end of their world, the end of the planter class dominance. Their story becomes one of loss, defeat, adopting this romanticized memory and trying to rebuild somehow.
And for the African American families who were enslaved on that same land.
For them, 1865 is day one, the beginning, the difficult, dangerous, but hopeful dawn of freedom. Their fight shifts immediately from seeking liberty to trying to secure land, jobs, education, political rights, basic dignity in a place that still saw them as inferior. Two completely opposite journeys starting from the exact same historical point.
So let's wrap this up. The Civil War wasn't just some interruption for the DuBose family. It was a fundamental break, a cataclysm.
It slammed the door shut on that era of unchallenged planter power, and it opened a new one, full of uncertainty, struggle, deep racial tension, economic hardship.
The physical damage was obvious, the ruined farms, the lost money, the dead.
But the deeper scars, the ones that lasted, were about identity. That lost cause narrative shaping white Southern identity on one side, and a long, hard struggle for true freedom and equality shaping black identity on the other. The war solved slavery, technically, but it created the massive, tangled challenge of Reconstruction.
Okay, so for you, our listener, here's something to really think about. Try to hold both realities of 1865 in your mind at the same time, right there on a DuBose plantation. Picture Henry James DuBose coming home, seeing ruined fields, maybe his house damaged, his money worthless, his entire world, the cause he bled for, utterly destroyed, defeated.
And right alongside that image, picture a family. People who had been enslaved on that exact same land, maybe for generations. Now they're walking away, maybe with nothing but the clothes they're wearing, but they're walking away free. Looking towards a future, they finally get to shape themselves. Utter ruin for one group, unimaginable hope for another, side by side.
And it was right there, in that supercharged moment, immense white loss meeting, sudden black freedom, that the seeds of Reconstruction were planted. This incredibly complex, difficult, and vital period in American history.
Understanding that collision, that split DuBose experience right there on the ground, that's really the key to understanding everything that came next for the family and for the nation.
So please join us next time. We're going to dive deep into that incredibly chaotic, transformative era, Reconstruction. We'll look at how the DuBose family, both the white descendants and the newly freed African-American families, tried to navigate that brand new, very difficult world.